Hey guys, this is episode 15 of Biomassed. Welcome,
Nope.
and we appreciate everybody. Okay, episode 14.
14.
God, you did it to me again. So it's episode 14 of Biomassed. Really appreciate everybody popping on into either our live stream or following us up on the Biomass channel and game. Really appreciate that, and for all the folks that download us off iTunes every week, we really do appreciate it. So tonight we've got a pretty interesting mix of folks, quite a few of the recently elected CPM1 members on. And apparently I've just been fired from intro duties because this is the 17th time in a row out of the 14 shows we've been on that I've not been able to get the episode number right. So that's good stuff. And for the record, Sirazel did change his screen name once more here in the Mumble chat, which you guys can't see in the audience.
I did that last week. And I didn't change it this week. This is the same one I had last week. And even Jackal changed his username last week. So
well, yeah, but he was being dark and brooding. you were just following true form of changing your name. So, okay, so tonight it's a little bit looser of show tonight. It's a little slow in the game, so we'll probably have a lot of different little things to kind of talk about and just kind of see how things are going. But we'll probably keep it to a fairly brief show tonight. Again, really appreciate everybody dialing into us to listen to either live or pull us on iTunes. So with that, we're going to jump right in. We're going to start with introductions. So Iron Wolf, why don't you kick it off?
Hello, my name's Iron Wolf. I am CPM1 elect. I am just normal gamer hanging around this time.
Awesome. Okay. And Derek?
Hey guys, Derry from OSG, tech support here on Biomass.
All right, cool. Pokey?
Pokey Draven, CEO of OSG Planetary Operations and host on Biomassed.
All right, and SirManBoy.
Yes, SirManBoy here, one of the directors for Molon Labe and a CPM1 elect. Glad to be here, as always.
All right, cool. And your favorite CPM1, Sirizel. For the record, I'm reading his screen name, not what did we actually call him that.
Believe it or not, actually, this actually placed me in the same spot on the alphabetical list as I would be normally. So I just have to say that, because there's nobody apparently between the SO and Z and Y today. So yeah, I'm Sirizel. I'm a CPM1 elect.
I'm gonna call it now. Next week he's gonna change the name to the most excellent CPM1 Sirizel.
I'm doing that now. I have to. I can't not do that. But these, the things that are on the name, the screen names in the Mumble chat, that's supposed to be private. Darn it. But anyways, I'm also an alliance leader of the Top Men Alliance in Dust 514, a member of the Bastion and EVE Online, and I am a co-host here on the podcast.
Awesome. Okay. And Zatara?
Hey, this is Zatara Rought. I'm the founder and CEO of Fatal Lab Solution, and I am also a CPM1 elect.
Nice. And Pokey, did we get you?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it just all went by so fast. This is a blur. Okay. So with that, guys, like I said, it's a little bit more of a free-form show tonight. What I kind of like to do is just go a little bit around the horn and just kind of talk about some of the things you've been trying out in game. Anything that's been striking you that you want to, throw some SP in this that's maybe outside your normal gameplay, and a little bit about what you've been doing or tactics that you've been trying in the game. Like I said, kind of free form tonight, and we'll get it going. So we can just kind of open it up to the room if anybody's got anything.
I guess for me, I've just been maxing out everything I can on my commando, just trying to get that fully fleshed out. And I'm kind of waiting to see what the exact changes are for Charlie, to see if I want to go into a different Logi suit, maybe one of the changed assault suits, something like that. Just I kind of want to see where the cards lie. It's going to be interesting, though. I'm looking forward to the changes.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair statement. I've probably got about 4.5 million SP cooking that I'm just kind of waiting to see what happens with Hotfix Charlie whenever that comes out. Let's see, Iron Wolf. What about you, man? You try pretty much everything in the game. I mean, you're definitely. I know you tout the Omni Soldier title, but you're one of the few that actually really does follow that. What are you working on right now?
Oh, I just recently finished the Minotaur Assault to level 3, so I should be running around with that. And afterwards, I'm planning on trying to get the vehicle, so I'm brought up and more up to speed with modules.
Okay, all right, that'll work. How about you, SirManBoy? What are you doing, man?
About 95% of the time I'm playing Logi still, mostly in my
Word.
Gal Logi suit, running dual scanners. Not finding a whole lot of utility in my other Logi suits, unfortunately, especially with respect to the Caldari and the Amar. Still pull out the Minmatar from time to time when I've got a heavy to rep. So really just using my Gal a lot, the Gal Logi, but it's working out pretty good because that scanner bonus is pretty sweet when you've got two of the Creodons, I believe I'm using on that one, which essentially with the 30-second cooldown and the target visibility with the bonus and everything, you can almost keep scans up nonstop, which is pretty helpful when you're in a squad. But right now I'm also working on some stuff for my heavy. That's sort of like my secondary role that I like to play around with. Recently got into the forge gun, got it all the way up to proficiency 5 today, and I've got my reload and ammo up to 4, so that's kind of fun to get into something new. And speaking of Logi stuff, since this is kind of an open show, one of the little heartbreaks that I suffered over the last 24 hours with respect to Charlie was noticing that the WP for injector changes aren't going to go through. They were scratched out, so
I did not notice that. Was there a reason for that?
I guess technical. But yeah, it's scratched out. If you look at the Charlie update thread, it's right there in plain sight for everybody. So that was kind of a letdown. I was really hoping that was going to make it. So
yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. That's like one of the ones. That's one of those changes that have been asked for. It's like a small change, but it's the difference between making a piece of equipment valuable or not.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't realize how useful, like if you run like an advanced or really a proto needle. I've used that to really good effect in PCs and stuff because, if you stab an armor tank suit with those things, they just pop back up at like 90 to 100%. It's ridiculous. It's pretty serious. There's no rep tool that can match it, but you lose probably, I think, total couple hundred war points off of it.
And that was really going to incentivize the use of the proto needles, which I thought was going to be a great thing. And I'm hoping that we can find other ways to do that if we can't actually, alter the WP. I mean, there's got to be something we can do to make that a more popular item in the community. And I've definitely been discussing, those kind of proposals with my fellow CPM1, members and trying to throw some ideas at Logibro too, and I think we've got some other ideas that we can work on. But when I actually saw that today in the Charlie thread and I confirmed that wasn't going through, that actually was a big letdown.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm gonna have to go back and read that out one since I'm a pretty dedicated support Logi as well. I was really looking forward to seeing what they did as the secondary changes in Charlie, because my assumption is it's still primarily focused on the assault suits and that kind of jazz.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but basically there are things that because we're still exploring what sort of things we can and cannot hotfix in a game, and like the letdown today is finding out that injector needles being separated by war points by grade level is one of those things.
Well, I mean, it's one of those that on the surface it seems to a lot of players that it would be extraordinarily easy to fix. Almost like figures in a database basically, and then when you find out it's not, that means it's probably tied to other things, or there's tendrils that work into different areas that are probably not readily apparent. And I think that's one of the things that I'll just kind of offer to the CPM guys in the room, which pretty much everybody but me and Derry, by the way. That's one of the things that would be really helpful to the community is as you guys understand and really understand what the envelope is that you can work around, that's pretty useful to the community in order for them to provide feedback to you. And some of it, honestly, like the war point thing for the needles, that we may not know that until we suggest it, they try to figure it out, and they come back and say, yeah, we just can't do that. So, but at least having that kind of dialogue with the players, I think is pretty huge, because, I would have thought that would have been a slam dunk, like very easy to do. But that also shows you how much I don't know about, actual putting ones and zeros in a game too.
Yeah, well, I mean, a big thing is if you think about it, if it's a single database field, that says, well, this is worth this many war points. If they were to just change that field, that's easy. But what you're talking about is changing different fields. So it really comes down to, was it written so that said war points affect every type of equipment or if each equipment had the same war point value listed. And so, if it didn't have it that way, then you have to add additional logic in there to determine what type of gear is being used.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. That's totally understandable. How about you, Zell? What have you been working on in game?
Actually shooting things, I've been still sticking with heavy suits more than anything else. Probably a bit more HMG lately than my forge gun that's my usual amusement. I gravitate between the two though. So, but the other big thing I've been focusing on lately is that I let the Alliance has just been kind of laid back a bit, and we've actually taken some big new pushes in recruiting new corps and players recently. So, for example, we actually just picked up 3 different corps in the last 24 hours.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've actually been noticing a fair amount of pretty active recruiting going on and cross recruiting. People are starting to. It just seems like there's more movement than there usually is. Maybe it's just a random observation, but there's a lot of people moving around. I still contest that I see a bunch of new guys coming into this game, like more than I have in a while. Maybe because I'm looking for them, I'm trying to keep an eye out for them. So, but there's a lot of newer players floating around this game, like more so than I would have thought.
Well, that's why the whole mentality that dust is dead. I don't buy into it because I see a lot of new people all the time that are truly new, and it's like, well, people are obviously still interested in the game enough to try it out. So, to give up on it is kind of pointless now. We need to keep trying and making a better experience so we can encourage those new players to actually, move to Legion if possible.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair way to look at it. Actually, that is something I wanted to bring up to you guys at some point later in the show. Hey, Zatara, how about you, brother? What have you been working on?
I've been actually playing a lot with dropships. So I didn't know this. This is not something that people had ever told me before. But the so I upgraded my missiles just from I had small turret operation whatever up to level 5, and but I only had missiles to level 1, so I got it up to level 5, and I went from a militia missile up to a proto missile, and boy was I in for a huge change. The rotation, like the movement speed of your actual dropship, seems super sluggish in comparison.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. I had never experienced this before. I'd never had missiles. I'd never changed missiles from militia missiles to anything. So that was a huge thing for me lately, is just noticing how sluggish my derp ship feels in comparison, and realizing now how easy it is for me to just hover. It's so much easier for me to hover now and just start taking people out. And in comparison to militia missiles that were super sensitive for me to aim with, and that's been huge for me. Anyway, so that's what I've been working on. Other than that, I've been working in PC and do what I do. I still play quad precision scouts with double damps and a shotgun instead of a combat rifle now, because I realize that a combat rifle just does not have the DPS to take someone down before they turn on you and finish you off because you're running around with 200 EHP.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. It's interesting. I had a lot of people ask me if small turret proficiency is worth it, because when you're dealing with like light weapons or the heavy weapons or sidearm, basically anything on the suit side, and you see proficiency equals some form of a damage buff, whether it's flat damage or to a particular damage flavor. When they see it on the turrets and they see it's a rotation speed, they really scoff at it. They're like, I don't know about that. And I'm like, no, I don't. Trust me. It's pretty legit. It's very helpful. So it's one of those hidden little things in there.
Well, yeah. Well, and just to clarify, for the listeners, this is not proficiency. This is simply operation. The proficiency skill actually has 0 use to me because I don't use gunners on my ADS. So the gunners actually get benefits, as I understand it, from the proficiency skill on missiles, because it actually increases your turn speed, like of the turret itself. Whereas the derp ship, the main turret of it, you actually aim the drop ship.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And the tiering for the essentially the light turret weapons, for lack of a better term, is purely for scaling for the meta level of the weapon, or correction, that's the operation. The proficiency is generally about your ability to track faster, and where that comes into play. Like for me, I use them in lavs a lot, or I will, if I'm hopping on board, if I'm like GCing or if I'm squad leading, I'll hop in a tank a lot of times, and I'll have the guy put like a small rail turret on it. And I'm pretty maxed out on small rail turrets, and it becomes extremely lethal at that point, particularly something like a small rail, because it's got a very slow tracking speed. So that 25% is actually very, very noticeable when you're on the back of a lav or you're rolling around in somebody else's vehicle.
Yep, that makes total sense.
No, but I would tell you, I messed around with missiles, but you're spot on. I have not put any SP into missiles. I had a friend of mine. He was playing around on his dropship, and he loaded up rails on one side and then missiles on the other. And he showed me the difference, just like you were saying, between like the baseline missile turret that comes on the dropship, basically, and one that he like the XT1s, or whatever the proto missile is. Huge difference. You can basically just aim at their feet and it'll splatter guys. Whereas with the baseline missile, at best it's a harassing weapon.
Yep.
Okay, cool. For me, as far as it kind of goes, I'm kind of with SirManBoy. I tend to play a lot of Logi, and I've been branching out a little bit, trying to do a few different things, working on scouts and commandos mostly. Using them in different roles and experimenting with different equipment options and things like that. I'm a little torn right now. We kind of talked about it at the beginning of the show and a little bit before the show, is until I kind of have a better idea what's really going on with Hotfix Charlie, or more likely when the target drop is for it. I'm kind of sitting on a lot of SP right now. So I've got about 41 million SP-ish, and then I've got about another 4 that I'm banking. So I'm literally just trying to figure out what would be the next thing that I want to try. I've toyed around with a couple different weapons and stuff like that, but I think what I'll end up doing is just trying something totally different. Like I said, either putting more into the scouts. I just have like advanced level scout suits basically, but actually putting more into that, the cloak, shotgun, stuff like that, and literally just trying something totally different than what I've been running for almost 2 years now. And I think that's kind of where my head's at right now. But like I said, a lot of it kind of comes down to what we think is going to happen in Charlie.
Yeah, I'm excited for the LP payout increases. I think that's going to be a really big win when Charlie drops. I mean, obviously we can't disclose what the exact number is going to be, but it's on the Charlie list, and I'm confident, based on what I've heard so far, that that's going to really attract a lot of players to that. So I think that'll be something that'll breathe some new life into the game and maybe move some people out of pub matches and into the faction warfare matches. I think that could be a lot of fun.
That's actually something I wanted to bring up. That was the things that, again, on the surface that you think that they can do to faction warfare, seems like that would be one of the fastest ways to create activity in the game, because PC kind of is what it is, and I don't know that they're going to be moving clone pack costs. I don't know how much more they're going to fiddle with that. It's just it's really tough to basically do a court battle with a 24-hour timer. It's not fun. But faction warfare is one of those things that you can walk in and pick guys up pretty much any time if you made it worthwhile to play, and you could get some fairly competitive matches in there if they dialed up the the payouts. I was doing the math the other day. We were going back and forth on the forums talking about it, and I basically tried, and what I was posing to them, and what I would pose to you guys just to hear your comments on, is what is, and I acknowledge the fact that you may be guessing at things that you already know about, or at least have an inkling of, but conceptually, what is the break-even point for an LP victory? So if I'm running X suit or X HAV or whatever, how much LP should I get back? At what point should I get LP back that I'm now breaking even for lost suits or lost vehicles? And the example I use is me, because that's what I know best. So when I do a fully stocked loyalty point store Logi, like I run a Cal Logi for the most part, occasionally a couple other ones, but generally a Cal Logi, And I will, when you run a proto Cal-Logi, I'm sitting at about 220 to 230 ISK, 220, 230,000 ISK, by the way, per suit, fully kitted out. When you translate that mostly that same fit to an LP store, that goes across 3 different factions to get everything I need to fit on it. And it runs somewhere around 1,110 LP. And that's for one suit. And I think it would take me a dozen matches, depending on the faction, to get that, depending on where your standings are. That's pretty outrageous. If you think about it, even if you're level 10, I don't believe I can recoup a single suit lost at level 10 under the current construct. And it didn't strike me as a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I think it's got to be sustainable is what it comes down to. Is I think that it should be possible to live in fact war matches.
Yeah, I mean, I always love doing faction warfare, but it's really hard to convince people to keep doing it. I mean, myself included, when it's like, well, okay, I got to go back to pubs to make the money back that I lost and really didn't get enough to make it worth my while. Because I mean, the level of competition is nice. It's better than a pub match, but not quite as stressful as PC. So it's kind of fun if you want a little extra, but you can't do it consistently, and it really sucks. Because I was very excited for faction work when it first came out, and you quickly realize you can't sustain an actual lifestyle on it. It's shitty. So I'm really looking forward to the increase personally.
And I hope it's more than just sustaining too. I hope it's quite forgiving. I mean, I think some of the best matches in this game are the ones where players throw caution to the wind and shit hits the fan and people engage. And not only being able to recoup, but being able to promote that kind of style of play in the game, I think would make it a lot more fun. And I'm hoping that these increased LP payouts are going to be more forgiving. I mean, it's certainly hard to sustain in pub matches unless you're running the cheapest gear. So I'm hoping that this really changes things up quite a bit and results in perhaps a more action-packed game mode than your pub matches, because the LP payouts are going to allow you to get everything that you need and more. So I guess we'll just wait and see. But I'm excited. I think the possibility is really there to make that thing really be a home run. So.
Well, and I think you really kind of hit the head on the nail there, because it's faction warfare is riskier. I mean, there's obviously things that can happen in faction warfare that can't happen in a pub match. So, going along with the classic, phrase of risk reward, if it's more risky, I should get more effective value out of a faction warfare match than I would a pub match. So the payout, it's in LP obviously, but it needs to be worth more than what I would get in, say, a pub match in terms of ISK. Because it is riskier, so I need to have a better reward to incentivize that. Otherwise, you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, even though the reward is the same, and that's never good.
Yeah, that and one thing that I was kind of thinking about, and I was kind of going back and forth on like I said, going back and forth on the forums on this was, I recommended that they approach. One, there's obviously going to be needs to be an increase in the base payout, per win, per loss, and then by standing. That and the standings grind in and of itself is pretty steep, particularly in the state of the game it is right now. But my thought was they could actually take a page from how pubs pay out, so that your personal performance gives you a bonus or equals things out. And I would have personally been pretty interested in that. Again, if you run a Logi or a vehicle, you're putting out a lot per capita, a lot more ISK/LP, per clone than most other people. But you're getting the same payout. So it's a very, very ISK inefficient or LP inefficient way to run. And that's why I was kind of hoping you could get, like I said, something that was based on, some kind of increase based on personal performance.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really excited about too with respect to this, because if it is a big success and it does drive a lot of players to it, because they're going to see that it does make their characters, more sustainable or can sustain their players, I should say, better than the pub matches can, is if this becomes popular and a lot of these big corps start doing Q syncs and multiple large corps start doing Q syncs, we might end up with what will essentially be a dirty team deploy situation where large teams of people from the same corp or the same alliance start facing off against each other. And I think that is also a recipe for very exciting matches. So that's one of my hopes. If we can drive a lot of players to that game mode and we can get a lot of big Q syncs going, that could result in a lot of fun, I think.
I would concur. I mean, like I said, if you're not, with the state of PC as it is now, there's very little, I guess, reason to play PC other than just to say that you have a district. Whereas you can get the same or better play, frankly, in some good faction warfare matches when you run up against a couple Q-Sync teams. That has at least been my experience in it. And the fact that I don't have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do it is pretty damn handy. So one of the other things, let's see, what was it? There's something else about faction warfare that I saw Retali started. It was something actually pretty innocuous. I think it was actually he's pushing for, I think, forum titles. Does that make sense? Yeah, forum titles. Tied to your faction warfare standings, which I don't know. It seems like it's one of those small things you can do for players, but it continues to reinforce, I think, the desire to engage the current community, which is, to me, probably a very positive thing.
They have that in EVE. I'm not big on the EVE forums. They have that in the EVE forums already, don't they, for the faction warfare?
No, they don't, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, again, like Jay said, I think that helps with the immersion a bit. It kind of helps you show off, and it does encourage faction warfare play because people will do things for titles. So I think that'd be really cool if they can actually pull it off.
I mean, one of the ideas bounced around was to be able to swap your portraits too, but that hasn't happened yet either.
Huh. That would be kind of actually a neat little thing to do. I think that's kind of my general impression over the last week or two is that there are so many little things that could be done. Rattati will probably never have his list go dry of quote unquote little things that on the surface don't sound like much, but they might mean something to some players, or might go again a little bit further in sustaining the current Dust community.
Well, and the thing I keep preaching is that there's a certain amount of time that they can put into Dust, and there's a certain amount of resources, and so for me, it's saying, what can we do with X number of resources and X number of man hours that gives the biggest benefit right now? And I mean, there's lots of stuff that's probably later down the line that's less resource efficient that they can do. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of little things that could probably be hammered out pretty quickly that would actually add quite a bit. I mean, they seem trivial on their own, but I think you kind of added that immersion. You increase the quality of the game bit by bit very quickly with these quick, easy changes. I mean, I say easy tentatively, but the fact that there's things you can do right now that add quite a lot, and I think they need to focus on that the most rather than big sweeping things that are going to take a long time, because I'd rather get more bang for my buck right now than later on when we can kind of take it a little bit slower.
No, I think that's pretty fair. If you guys don't mind, what I'd like to do is kind of bridge over to a slightly different topic, but on a related note to our last discussion there about little things and Dust. I think probably the biggest piece of news that we've had recently is that the Oceania server is going to shut down. And for everybody, for those of you that don't know that are listening, the Oceania server is essentially the Australian time zone server. It is basically the home server for the Aussies and for quite a few people in the Pacific area. It's not the Asian server. That's slightly that is a different and distinct server. But that's something that actually got teed up to quite a few Aussies here recently, and they have a fairly strong minority inside the game. I mean, they're pretty vocal. They're big supporters. They have been, and it's a pretty serious blow to them when you kind of start dropping their server. And one of the things that you hear some people talk about, some other pundits and stuff like that, kind of there's a little bit of woe is me. Like, okay, is that the first one? And is that the first domino to go before they truly shut Dust off? Technically, yes, it is, since it's the first for a server to go down. But I still figure they've got at least 12 to 18 months of very solid Dust play before Legion is anywhere near the point where they can actually migrate players to it. And that's just sort of my ballpark shot at it. But I'd kind of like to hear what your guys' thoughts are on the Oceania server being closed out.
Yeah, I mean, I know that that there was a certain video where people were discussing whether or not this was the beginning of the end of server shutdowns, but it really came down to the fact that they're going to maintain the hardware infrastructure needed for the players who are playing, and if there wasn't enough people playing on that server, then it's both not worth the cost to keep it up, and it's people were using it to circumvent normal gameplay, I guess, as well. So you look at those two things combined, and I don't think it's any wonder why it was shut down. It does really, really suck for that community, though. Particularly for Final Resolution, which is primarily Oceanic region players.
Yeah, my sympathies are definitely with the Aussie and Kiwi bros down there who have to deal with this. It's unfortunate. I mean, CCP has their reasons, but yeah, that stinks. I don't know how that's going to ultimately affect their gameplay experience. I don't know if they're going to, deal with more lag and things like that. But, I feel bad for those guys because there's a lot of good players down there in that part of the world. And, I'm sure they're not feeling real great about this decision.
Yeah, I mean, let's make it clear. Nobody's turning the game off for them, but they will probably get longer pings, and they will probably experience a little bit more lag than somebody with a home server, like if you're North American, you're playing off the North American server. So it might affect their individual gameplay, but let's be clear, nobody's actually being blocked or shut down from the game. They still have a pipe into it. It's just a slightly longer way to get into the game.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I noticed was I think in that announcement it stated it wasn't just that they'd move to one server or the other, but that individual players may be directed to either the Asian or American server based on the particular routing of their ISP. And while I understand from a technical sense that the ISP routing does make a difference on what your performance in game is, it also means potentially that community has just been split in half.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Okay. But
well, there's still nothing stopping them from going to their server selection and changing it to either Asian or Americans, whatever they decide to prefer.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair point. And what I would tell you is, like a lot of times in the morning, if I'm trying to catch a match or two, like before I head off to work or something like that, I would actually change over to the Euro server because you get better fights because it's in their prime time from, based on where I'm at in the US. And that's, that was a technique I've used for a long time is you find out who's got prime time server and then you get your fights on there, depending on when your playtime is. So, I mean, like I said, it's not a great thing, but hopefully what it'll do is it'll continue to, feed active and consistent players into the servers and into the matches, which is never a bad thing, by the way. So I did want to address it because I know that caused some consternation by people. But it's one of those things that you do have to kind of talk about. It's not good. And overall for the probably for the health of the game, it's probably not a bad thing. But like I said, I'm very much a pragmatist on this. We all realize that at some point, Legion is the answer. And Dust is actually a very fun game to play, but it's on a clock, and what we all desire is that that clock is really not an end game, but that clock is literally a transfer point to Legion, and I think that's what a lot of people are really getting their head around now, and even this long after the FanFest announcement, I think that a lot of people are aware of that, and they're continuing to play because they do want to get into Legion. And what I've kind of seen generally, and again, this is a kind of my observation data point of one, like from myself, is that even though a lot of veteran players moved on to different things, as new guys come in or guys that aren't quite as bitter stay on, they're very keenly interested in making the bridge to Legion. And the best thing I can kind of describe that is to players that started playing within the last 6 months, or let's say since like last November, like since 1.8 dropped. This is a much, much different game than it was when it was released in beta or when it was first released to us. So to them, the game feels like it's a different quality than what a lot of us say it is. Let me put it that way. It's not a AAA shooter, but it's still a pretty good game, particularly for the price they're paying, which is technically nothing. So that was the first thing that was kind of, like I said, a couple of guys kind of made that real to me the other day, that they saw the game through a different light than I did. Now, I tend to be a pretty positive guy about the game. But to them, the game is different because we've seen, this massive, rocky start. They've seen it up to a certain point. The other thing is because I think they're just less jaded than a lot of the player base, the old school player base is. They're very excited about basically playing the game for a year for free here and there, and then building up some skills, and then letting it transfer to Legion. So they're actually quite interested in that. So it's kind of it's very unfortunate. I'm not going to call it a changing of the guard or anything like that, but I do think that the player base has, there's been a turnover in the player base, which is still, small but fairly consistent in terms of the numbers. So at least that was my observation. That was one thing I wanted to kind of bring up to you guys, or at least just tee up for a quick discussion. It's probably our last topic for the night. And what your guys' thoughts on that are?
I've actually had a friend of mine that recently started playing like last 2 weeks, and I asked her, so what do you think? And she's like, well, it's a lot to handle, but she actually was enjoying it, and I think that was, like you said, a bit of in contrast to what we are used to thinking, like, oh god, it's just an awful game. It's been so messed up and rocky. But I think, to a new player, they haven't seen the changes that we've had to go through, and they haven't seen things get nerfed or anything like that. So they just see the end result, which, like you said, it's jaded for us because we think, oh, well, I had this and they nerfed it, it's terrible now. But for them, that's just the way it is. And so I think that it's a bit more of a pure perspective on it. So I think it's good to always keep talking to new people and try to bring them in and getting improving your own perspective on how things are actually going, and not letting the bitterness get too out of hand. Because I know a lot of people just that the bitterness is pretty intense, and I try to keep a pretty positive outlook like you do. But even I'm kind of grumbling at times because of things that have happened, or how far they haven't gotten despite prior promises. But I think overall it's, kind of learn something from the new people and see how we can move forward and make it better, rather than dwelling on the past and whatnot.
Yep. No, I think that's a pretty pragmatic approach. How about you guys? What else do you guys think on that?
I think it's when you're a new player going into a game where there are vets with, like me, nearly 60 million skill points. There are plenty of people in the 40s and 50s as well. It's a pretty tough thing to walk into. My hope, and maybe I'm a little too optimistic here with this, is, one of the other things that I think will be good about a better faction warfare situation is that guys are going to have much lower barriers to getting to better gear through the LP store. And I hope that does some good for the lower SP players and the new people coming into the community, because if they're buying their gear strictly with ISK and with their low SP totals, it's really tough to compete out there. I mean, it's really hard. So maybe faction warfare will help. The changes in faction warfare will help in that regard too. At least I hope so. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that ideally you should have that, kind of that high sec, low sec, null sec feel to the game, where, high sec should, in theory, be somewhat geared towards the newer players, I think. And it's been, I think, having all of the top tier players having nowhere else to get money but pubs is not helpful.
Well, and kind of going off what SirManBoy said, I'm glad to see that the potential for getting better gear early on is there. I think that for a lot of new players, they see guys running around in their proto assault suit, and they ask, how do I get that? And I have to tell them, well, you've got to go through 3 levels of frame suits and 5 levels of an assault suit to get there. And not that people shouldn't be rewarded for putting their time and effort into SP, but I also think that in a free-to-play game, if a player doesn't feel like they're being rewarded fairly early, they aren't going to stay interested because they feel that the time barrier is just too much to overcome. So I think it'll be good to kind of have a structure where they've got options to maybe get some of that high level gear a little bit quicker. It'll be harder to do, but they actually have that option available to them, and they can feel like they can actually advance and gain kind of a bit of an advantage, or at least lessen their disadvantage against some of the veteran players. And I think that'll go a long way in helping new players feel a little more useful, I guess, in the game, rather than the wall of, well, I'm 40 million SP behind that guy, I'm screwed, I'll never catch up to him. So I think maybe rewarding them a little bit earlier is going to go a long way in making the new player experience a lot better.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something with that. It's kind of interesting as you look back and you try to read into what's going on with the different, kind of the different tiers of folks in the game. But like I said, very interesting topic.
Well, it's something I also see a lot with veteran players talking about wanting a respec and whatnot. And they say, well, I want to try new things, and I need a respec to do that. And I'm like, you can just get SP like anyone else and spend it on something new. And I think as veterans, we're a little jaded in that we want to have the very top tier thing right away, because that initial grind is such a pain in the ass to get to where we want to go. I mean, if you want to get into be a Logi suit, it's a shitload of SP you've got to get through. And as a veteran, we're like, I've got my proto assault suit. I don't want to deal with getting into the Logi stuff. And we forget how much of a barrier that really is, and the fact that we feel we need a respec to make that worthwhile, I think is really telling that for a new player, it's awful trying to get into the suit they want. Particularly like in the case of a Logi suit, because there are no frame suits with multiple gear slots that I know of. So I tell people, well, you may like Logi, but you've got to go through 3 levels of this to even try it out. And I think that barrier is really hindering, and I think it really kind of ruins a lot of the new player experience because of that. They've got to get past that SP wall, and it's frustrating because you see these other guys that have been here forever for 2 years like the rest of us, and it's like I'll never catch up to that. Why bother? It takes too long.
The one thing I would say about that is a little bit deceptive is I can, any of it, and like we've said it before in the shows, like any of us you probably in here can run a standard fit suit, like literally like tier 1 all standard gear. And if you threw us into like a match full of newbies, just the passive skills that we have alone give us a decisive advantage, and the fact that you know the maps, and the fact that you understand how the mechanics work on all the games, and you understand what works, what doesn't work, that kind of stuff. Just the knowledge base and the passive SP that you have, I personally think that is a far more decisive advantage than people running proto gear. And I would tell you that every time I hear somebody beefing about dudes curb stomping people in pubs and proto gear, I hate to, and this is the part where I swear to God, I sound like some of the people that Zatara hangs out with now. It's literally like, hey man, I got 600 million SP in my wallet, or it's 600 million ISK in my wallet. I ground, I guess that's the right word, for long enough to run that proto gear, and I've got all those skills to 5. Why should I not run it? I will never be able to run out of money at this point. And it's unfortunate. It's not, I'm literally not trying to be mean, but it's like proto gear is not the problem. I think we've all said it at one time or another. Matchmaking is the problem. And with the player base as big as it is, i.e. as small as it is, you are always going to have guys with 40, 50 million SP playing against guys with 5. And it's ugly, but that's it. That is what it is.
Well, I think a lot of the issue arises, and there's a lot of advantages that you get. Like you said, just having knowledge of the game is an advantage. Just having more passive skills is an advantage. And just having better gear is an advantage. So as a veteran, you have so much going for you over a newbie, and it takes so long to gain those advantages. I mean, passive skills are going to be, that's always the deciding factor, that you're going to, more passive skills is going to be your main advantage. But the fact that it takes so long to get proto gear for a new guy, he can't overcome that disadvantage of a 2-year veteran with proto gear. I mean, the 2-year vet's going to have the passive skills, sure, but it's going to take that new player so long to get better gear that he is stuck with that extreme disadvantage of multiple things stacked against him. And I think that's really what's killing people, is that it takes level 5 to get that proto suit rather than something maybe a little bit lower, and that's why it takes so long to catch up, and that's what pisses people off and makes them very frustrated as new players.
And I think another thing too is that this factors into just not the new players not getting the right information put in front of them is as someone mentioned, you see, people see the proto suit and they say, oh, I want one of those, how do I get that? But in reality, what happens is the drop suit skills are such a huge SP investment, but comparatively they actually provide a very low return. I mean, I would say for probably the first 6-8 months of gameplay, I did not have a proto suit. I had proto weapons. I had a massive number of.
Did you say 6 to 8 months?
It might have been, yeah. The thing is though, because you're looking at a gameplay design where you can get more out of the passive skills, you can get more out of the weapon skills than you'll ever get out of the drop suit skills. I mean, when at the point where I started pushing into proto drop suits was when I didn't have a better thing to spend my skill points on, because getting your weapon operation up to 5, making sure your passives are decked out, they're 10 times more valuable than the proto suits. And I think that that's something that a lot of new players maybe don't realize.
Well, it's a pitfall you see in EVE a lot of times. People will train the ship and they have no support skills and they get their ass kicked because the ship isn't the most important part. There's other support skills, and that's really not hammered in either. I think in general, it's just the SP barrier for what you need to be at least viable is rather high. And I think that's a lot of the problem.
But I mean, it's like when you find people who have the, if you look at the core armor and core shield upgrade skills, each providing 25% HP buff, and you find people who have skilled into, a prototype drop suit, and they don't even have that, and it's like there's no point. You're wearing less than a standard suit. Without with those passives, because you went for the proto suit instead of going and getting your passives first.
Well, that's probably a lesson that isn't really hammered in. I think that for in whatever form, it needs to be kind of shown that the proto suit is not the most important part. You need to level things evenly and not just go straight for the shiniest thing in the toy box.
Oh, another factor that both Eve and Dust failed to hammer home is the fact that on day 1 you could still be a useful player, despite not having all the skills and all the gear and equipment. I mean, Goonswarm has exemplified this rather often on EVE Online, and in Dust 514, it is highly possible that a brand new player out of the box could potentially still kick a prototype person's ass.
Happens all the time, bro. All the time. Not to me.
I think worse than the SP thing is, like, even if the new guy, busts his tail to finally get into that proto suit, good luck having enough ISK to afford to run it. It's like a person who buys a house, but then they can't afford the mortgage payments. You know what I mean? It's, I feel bad for these guys, because even when they break that barrier and they finally get into something cool, the way that, the money flows in this game, the ISK, it makes it really hard to sustain yourself. So, again, going back to the faction warfare changes, maybe that'll improve the situation. But, man, is it tough for new guys out there?
Well, I don't got any prototype gear, so I wouldn't know what to suffer yet.
Here's the thing for me, like, and people are gonna, think that I'm crazy, but I just don't think that when it comes to tank differences, that proto gear is vastly separated from advanced gear. Like, the only thing that proto gear does for me between, for example, on my aside from my Logi suit, because the equips are vastly different, and the CPU PG allows me to run proto equips, and maybe this is also because heavy CPU and PG and light suit CPU PG needs looked at, and it is being looked at currently. But my tank differences on my heavy are virtually virtually the same exact fit, minus maybe 150 EHP or 75 EHP. And so, like, for a lot of the time, like, there's just, unless you're min-maxing, there's just simply not a good reason to risk all that money when you're not getting more than a half of a second in more time to react versus an enemy.
I think the differences really depend upon the class too. I feel like I can be very respectable in a basic or advanced heavy suit, but I notice big drop offs when I logi, and there's plenty of people out there who would disagree with me of this, but I find that
Logis are huge.
my logi game
you
is
can't.
greatly enhanced with a proto suit, like
I
by a
would-
long shot.
I would tell you that if
But it's
you
also
are
the
running less than
exception and more the
advanced, you're not
rule.
running a logi suit. Well, no, and that's fair, but what you're describing though is it goes down to the relative effectiveness by tier, the relative ISK efficiency by tier by class. Because when they went into tier side with the vehicles, that was the big beef you heard from the tanker community. I mean, Pokey can tell you all day long about it. When a militia tank was outperforming or was performing exactly at the same level of efficiency that a dialed out tank was, that's a little bit insane. Your gear really like the SP that you put into gaining access to those higher tiers, that should mean something. I mean, I have to say that should mean something. It's not all about the passes, but there should be a higher end reward for that. So I think that is something to consider. But I think you guys are spot on just then. Is like it's very different by suit. I don't know what it is for scouts and stuff like that, but I know that I've seen guys with a Dren heavy suit, absolutely wreck shop because you get the benefit of a lot of the passives and the skills. Even if you've protoed up a Sentinel suit, it's pretty fucking significant. More so than most suits, I think.
Yeah, because I think I do fairly well in my recently been playing the Commando. I think the only thing that's not a standard or militia on it is the single complex armor wrap. Everything else is standard. And I don't know, the KDR like 4 or 5, something like that on most matches. And so I mean having maxed out skills is a huge deal. I guess the point I'm getting at is that if you give players access to some better equipment, it kind of helps them bridge that SP gap a little bit sooner, because the SP gap is going to always be the deciding factor. But I think if they can get the support skills, the modules, the suits up, a little bit sooner, I think it's going to help in overcoming some of the big disadvantage they have against the guys running, 40 million SP with a proto suit. It does kind of help get that advantage evened out in that regard, at least in terms of gear, and then they can use skill to try to overcome the SP advantage.
Yeah, and these are the things that I think you guys are going to be dealing with over time, is in the CPM. Whether it's either Dust or Legion, it's just kind of that ongoing cycle of balance, or kind of trying to find the sweet spot for all these different things, which we can have a whole separate show on. But I think we had a pretty good run of topics tonight, guys. And what I wanted to do was sort of move into shout outs here pretty quickly. Just to kind of sum it up, we had a little bit of a relaxed show tonight. It's a little slow, a lot of little things going on. Probably the most significant piece of news was the shutdown of the Australian server, which, while that's tough for our Aussie bros, that's, by no means is that a restriction for them getting into the game. And in a weird way, maybe it will make it a little bit, push a few more people onto the Asian or North American servers, so you get a little bit better matchmaking. A little bit of discussion about what we were all doing in game, just kind of kicking some ideas around. A little bit of good talk about the LP stuff and the faction warfare payouts, which I think is a good continuation of the discussion we were having for the last couple of weeks on, Dust, Eve, and Legion, and how they link together. And we focused a lot on the faction warfare piece in the last 2 episodes, and particularly when CSM Funky Bacon was here. We had a lot of good exchanges on that. And I think the more I'm looking into it, the more I'm looking at, I think Dust really should hang its hat on the faction warfare aspect of the game as a great way to sustain the player base and to really explore a lot of different things that you can do inside the game, and hopefully maybe that carries over to Legion too, because I think we're all pushing for that Eve link, even though it appears tenuous right now on the design path. So with that, guys, what I'd like to do is kind of move right into shout outs. So pitch up to anybody that you want, and again, we appreciate everybody for coming on the show tonight, and for all the guys out there listening, all the guys and gals listening or downloading. It was a little bit of a short one, but that's okay. We need to do those occasionally, because we will also have our our marathon 2-hour sessions here on occasion too. So we're trying to even it out.
We might actually be. This might be the first one we actually hit our target. So
Well, that's I'm staying with my KDR of 1 then. Excellent. Okay. So Iron Wolf, you're up first, brother.
I'd like to give a shout out to my fellow CPM 1 electees for sticking it out with us so far and trying to get caught up on speed on everything. And hopefully we can have a really good term this year.
Outstanding, man. Derry, shout outs?
Shout out to all the listeners out there. Thanks for letting us bore you or entertain you for an hour each week. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
That's fair enough, brother. Poggy?
Shout out to OSG, my corp. And also shout out to the Oceania guys. I really feel for you. It really sucks that you lost your server, but I hope to see you in game soon. And shout out to Ratani. Thanks. You're doing a lot of good work, and hoping to see Charlie soon and looking forward to it.
Cool. And SirManBoy?
Yeah, getting to know a lot of the CPM1 guys over the last week has been a lot of fun. And I had a conversation with Denny Blue, a lot of smoke up his ass about, all the fine work that guys like him do in the game, because he runs a big corp and, they're responsible for so much training and so much recruitment, and just they're such a huge asset to the community. And I just want to give a huge shout out to really everybody who's like that. All of you guys in leadership, you CEOs, officers, directors who are in corps like Dust University, Latino Killers Corps, Subreddit, KEQ, the list goes on. You guys play such a vital role in this community, and I just want to say, thank you and keep up the great work. And hopefully, with these changes in faction warfare, we can see a resurgence in a lot of ways, and maybe that'll help with some even additional recruiting, and maybe you guys can sort of revitalize your communities out there. So again, thanks for everything you guys do out there. You're a big part of this, the success this game has enjoyed. It has been somewhat limited, but thanks to you, it's as good as it is. So I appreciate it.
No problem, brother. Soraya?
Yeah, I'm going to give my shout out not only to the CPM1 elect, but to CPM0 for holding down the fort for the past 18 months. They well deserve a rest and a break, and I hope they enjoy that. Except for Iron Wolf, because he does not get a break. He just gets to go right back to work.
Just a masochist.
And Zatara?
Check. I'm still here, right?
Yep,
Didn't disconnect once this time. This is a record, and it's only because I think the podcast was so short this time.
Well, it's because you weren't talking as much as usual.
That's
you
true.
Have too much bandwidth.
That's also true. I think I'd just like to give a shout out to Ben this week, CCP Logi Bro, for dealing with all the stuff on the forums recently. Even though he's on a long weekend, we've been having some interesting threads go around. If you've been paying close attention to the recruitment section of the forums, and poor Ben, poor Logi Bro, he's just had his hands full on this weekend. So I just want to give a shout out to him. He does a lot of work and does a lot of things on his own time to benefit the game, and he doesn't have to. So I just want to give a shout out to him and all the hard work he does.
Awesome, man. I was seeing some of that too.
Be nice to the devs on weekends, seriously.
Yeah, no, that's no joke. Like I actually did mention that the other week in my shout out. That's like quite serious. Like a lot of dudes get on the forums on the weekends, and so they like start demanding answers and punching buttons and raging and stuff. And they tend to forget that that's the other dude's weekend, and he's actually trying to do what you're doing, which is relaxing and doing something other than work. So I've got 2 shout outs tonight. One of them to anybody involved in making Guardians of the Galaxy. Freaking straight up movie. Took the family to that right before the show. That I highly recommend. I definitely want to give a plug to that movie for everybody out there. An absolutely just a lot of fun to go see. They really did a good job with that one. So highly recommend you bring. That's good as a solo or with your buddies, or if you got even my 5-year-old, he loved it. So have at it, guys. And at some point, by the way, Soraya, please mark this down. We need to go around all of our regulars and figure out who fits which Guardians of the Galaxy character the most. So that'll be
next week's topic. Yeah,
I believe we can do that. And the last thing we'll do is just give a guy by the name of Miguel Caron a shout out. I won't go into a lot of details, but he's a good dude and he's doing a lot of really good work on a variety of different projects. And just somebody I want to give a shout out to. And I do know that he listens to the podcast on occasion. And I'll talk to you guys in the after show about that one. So take it easy, guys. And we will bring this episode to a close. We really appreciate everybody joining us and signing off for the night. 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 And signing off.